If you've recently watched The Quiet Place, well, get ready for The Dark Place. You know, horror movies nowadays, they always have to symbolize something, they always have to stand for something, it's always a metaphor for something, and this is one of the questions I want you to ask yourself, viewer, whilst you are watching this video. What does the Bird Box stand for? The synopsis for this movie is: when a mysterious force decimates the population, only one thing is certain. If you see it, you die. And I don't know if you remember a movie called The Happening, starring Mark Wahlberg, but it's very, very similar to that. In The Happening, you had a sort of like evil wind that made animals and people commit suicide just by brushing over people. While in this one, it's very similar, except you have to look at it. It cannot just brush over you, you have to look at it, and it sort of drives you crazy. The movie starts in the present tense. We see Sandra Bullock, who is, by the way, called Mallory, but I'm just gonna keep calling her Sandra Bullock. We see Sandra Bullock with her two young children, and when I'm seeing the first shot of the children, I'm already like, I already want to quit watching this movie, because these two children are just in the right age of being annoying. You know, they are not babies, but they are not old enough to fend for themselves or do anything intelligent. They actually do some intelligent stuff, but we'll talk about that later. They are around 5 years old, because after this short introduction, you know, we see them receive a radio message telling them to go down river for 2 days and then they can reach a safe haven. After the present sequence, we go back to the past, 5 years into the past to be more precise. And let me just say, I always hated past sequences in movies, because normally what they accomplish, or what they are trying to accomplish with it is, well, the movie is not good enough in the present tense, so we'll just make two movies, and they run alongside each other essentially. If I had to sum up Bird Box in one sentence, it would be: pregnant women deserve special treatment because they let someone knock them up. But more on that later. The first scene we get in the past is Sandra Bullock talking to her sister. Sandra Bullock is pregnant, and we already get a sense for her character because she's, you know, very logical, whereas her sister is very, you know, lovey-dovey. They turn on the news, and you know, they are talking about how people in Europe are, you know, committing suicides. There's like a mass suicide wave, and Sandra Bullock just like turns off the TV because, you know, fuck Europe. It's like another planet essentially to Americans. And let me just point out that in the news they are talking about how, you know, it started in Romania, and the reason why they said Romania is because the average American doesn't know where Romania is to begin with. And then the news anchor is talking about how, oh, it started in Romania, but now it's in Russia. And the reason why they said Russia is because the average American knows where Russia is. And then they talk about how, you know, it could jump to Alaska, whatever the evil thing is. And I don't understand why they picked Romania, because Romania is not even bordering Russia. Why didn't they just pick Ukraine or something? So anyway, Sandra Bullock and her sister go to the urologist in the hospital to check the baby. And again, Sandra Bullock doesn't want to know the sex of the baby. She doesn't want to know if it's a boy or a girl, which again shows how logical she is. And she's very, you know, uncaring for her baby. This is fine, you know. A lot of people are like that. Also, the doctor was Indian, which was very appropriate, I would say. Because if the doctor is not a white guy or an Indian person, then why the fuck would you go to them anyways? And on the way out, Sandra Bullock grabs an adoption pamphlet, which is a really shitty foreshadowing in my opinion. You can guess kind of where this movie is going just in the first 5 minutes. Even in America, obviously in America, people start committing suicide around them. So the evil thing has finally reached the US of A. So Sandra Bullock and her sister are trying to get out. They manage to get to the car, and her sister turns. She looks at the evil thing and she flips the car over when they are trying to escape. And everybody is just like in a massive shock, obviously. There's a whole crowd of people just running around. And it was a really weird scene, because then like random people on the street start to help Sandra Bullock because she's pregnant. Well, for one, it's not apparent that she's, you know, pregnant. How would you see it if you are in a massive crowd of people? How would you see it in the chaos? But anyways, these like random ass people, instead of, you know, running for their own lives, they decide to help Sandra Bullock. And we see a house in the background where there's fucking John Malkovich, and a woman runs out to help Sandra Bullock, but the woman turns and she just sits inside a car, inside a burning car, to kill herself. But anyways, this ragtag group of people make it into the house. As it turns out, it's not the house of John Malkovich, it's the house of Dr. Wu, who, by the way, portrays a gay man. But let's talk about that later. So we have all these people inside the house of Dr. Wu. There's at least 10 different people in there, all of, you know, different, you know, sexes and races and ages. There's a massive panic. They decide not to watch the news or, you know, look up social media because the news told them not to. So then it's one of the most awkward fucking scenes in the entire movie, because there's this black guy called Charlie. I always remembered his name because he was like a supermarket worker, so he had a name tag and he had like Charlie on it. Anyways, this black guy called Charlie is like, he's going on about what this is, like, he's like, it's the end of the world, blah blah blah, religious talk, but he's using very, very precise, you know, names and historical facts, and it just felt like it was just a guy reading a fucking script. There was no sense of realism whatsoever in that scene. And then he tries to explain himself by saying that, oh, he's writing a book, that's why he knows so much, but it still feels really unauthentic. We also find out that the woman that ran outside to save Sandra Bullock, that later, you know, turned, she just went to sit inside a burning car. Yeah, that was the wife of John Malkovich. And John Malkovich there was a scene where he's just like looking outside at his wife burning. He doesn't even flinch. It's not that, you know, Dr. Wu had to stop him from running outside. No, he doesn't even flinch. He doesn't fucking care at all. And we later find out, you know, that he's like kind of like an asshole. He's the very logical thinker, similarly to the character of Sandra Bullock. But it's still your fucking wife, man. It's so unrealistic. Also, a little point on Sandra Bullock's acting. I didn't find it very good, but at the same time, I can't really give you a concrete example as to why it's bad. So it's probably just me being pedantic. I don't really know. It's just a feeling that I didn't really like her, and it's maybe because I've seen basically all her comedy movies, so I'm just setting myself up for failure. I don't know. So there's all these different people inside. I said that there's obviously Sandra Bullock. There's John Malkovich, whose wife just died. There's the gay Dr. Wu guy. There's the fat guy Charlie who works in the supermarket. There's also a woman who is studying to be a cop, this like really fit girl. There's a bad boy type of guy who's like really muscular and tall. He's taking drugs, and you can already sense something about this bad boy guy character and the cop girl. Well, anyways, then there's a grandma, there's an old lady. There's also another black guy who turns out to be a soldier, and I'm probably forgetting some other people, but whatever. It's still, everybody's in chaos, everybody's panicking. We hear a knock on the door, and obviously in a situation like this, you don't really want to let people in, but they decide to let this girl in. And this girl, it's not very nice to say, she's a fat girl, that's how I would refer to her. They decide to let this fat girl in. Her name is Olympia, so you already fucking hate her. And I thought that they were making a pregnancy joke, because this movie is full of inappropriate jokes, more on that later. But as it turns out, the fat girl is actually pregnant. But it's such an unauthentic scene, because I don't understand why they asked her if she's pregnant. Because for one, she doesn't look like pregnant. Okay, they asked if Sandra Bullock is pregnant because it's more apparent on her that she is pregnant. Even that scene was unrealistic, you know, in the chaos. How would you see that? In this case, there's 0% chance of you seeing that. And yet it turns out that yeah, the fat girl is pregnant. At this point, I just want to bail out on this movie because it just feels like, you know, pregnant women, the agenda movie. But anyways, I decided to keep watching it, unfortunately, and write my little notes. So after this, we get Dr. Wu, the gay guy character. They tie him up into a chair because he's going to test to see if the wind, the evil wind, can affect him through electronics, which doesn't fucking make any sense because it can. The way they do it is there are cameras around the house, and they tie him up to a chair, and he's like looking at there's like a monitor inside his house. And yes, he turns and he kills himself in a really comical way because he knocks his chair over. You know, he's tied to a chair. He hits his head on like this stone and he just instantly dies. There's a lot of cartoony things in this movie that happen. This is one of them. Like, he just instantly dies, which is very unrealistic. Then they have a scene where the cop girl is stretching. The bad guy character is like looking at her. Again, really shitty. Not really foreshadowing, but it's just, you know, really obvious what's going to happen. They start to fuck. But after this scene, we go back to the present tense, where Sandra Bullock, aka Mallory, and the two children on the river, they meet a guy. And the guy is not wearing any blindfolds or anything. And he hasn't killed himself, so we are like, what the fuck? And as it turns out, he's crazy. He was affected by the wind. He didn't kill himself, but he wanted Sandra Bullock and the children to see. So then she has to kill him. And then we find out that there are these people that are crazy. They don't kill themselves, but they want others to turn. So then we go back to the past again. Everybody's hungry. Our ragtag group of people decide to go for a shopping trip. Lots of family fun. Charlie, the big black guy, has an idea that they could go to his supermarket because it's chock full of food. So then the group is deciding who has to go to the mall. And obviously there's Charlie. He knows the place, so he goes even though he doesn't want to. The soldier black guy goes as well. The cop girl goes, fair enough. But then Sandra Bullock, Olympia, the fat pregnant girl, they are arguing who should go. And then they decide, Sandra Bullock is like, oh yeah, it's fine. This time I'll go, but the next time you can go. Why the fuck would you take a pregnant woman with you on a dangerous mission outside? Just let the fucking other people go. You know, just let the cop girl go with some of the strong guys and the supermarket guy, and then that's it. And then I realized the reason why they decided that, you know, it's, you know, Sandra Bullock this time and then the fat girl the other time is because apparently pregnant women have to be included in all fucking activities. Fuck that. So then we have a really shitty artificial drama scene where they are traveling in the car. It was actually a really clever idea where they covered the windows and everything in the car, and they used the GPS. They used the GPS navigation to get to the mall, but they also used the parking sensors on the car. Most cars only have parking sensors turned on, I think, if either you are going at a slow speed or you are reversing. Anyways, whatever. It was an okay idea. Then the evil wind is like outside, they can feel it, obviously they can't look at it. And we have like this artificial fucking drama scene where Charlie, the black guy, wants to get out of the car because he's scared. That fucking made no sense, because if he was really scared, then the opposite would happen, you know, he doesn't want to leave the car. He freezes because he's so afraid, but no, he wants to get out of the car. But luckily they like stop him. Anyways, they almost crash the car, but they arrive at the mall, and then one of this, like, I remember I told you about the bad jokes. One of the bad jokes is like, the GPS says, "You have arrived at your destination." We had another bad joke where Sandra Bullock's sister likes horses, so when they are fucking panicking at the very beginning of the movie, she's like, "Hang on to your horses." And then they get inside the mall, and the Charlie, the black guy that works there, is like, you know, the whole mall is like trashed, and he's like, "Well, I'm not cleaning this up." It's not, I'm not saying they're not inappropriate jokes, but they are so like not really poorly timed. It's just, why would you have them in a movie like this? It's fucking baffling. I had an idea where maybe they could have the whole like scene with Charlie in the car, he's trying to get out. Or maybe he could have been claustrophobic, but then that doesn't make sense either, because then he wouldn't have gone on this little expedition. The only reason they wanted him to go is because he apparently knows the supermarket, but he pointed it out that, you know, it's a fucking supermarket. Like, you don't need a guide to go inside there. Also, I forgot to tell you this, but why the fuck do you need a group of people to go to the supermarket? Why don't you just have 2 people go? So then there's less people in the car, you can rack up food and water and everything. There's more space for them. Why the fuck do you need a group of people to go? Let alone a pregnant woman. Oh yeah, and also, I said that Charlie doesn't want to go to the supermarket, but then Sandra Bullock is like, well, if you come, you'll have more material to write your book on. Because as I said before, he's like this religious guy, he wants to write a book, that's why he knew all that specific, inauthentic information. That was such a bad scene. But it's fucking... why would you want to... The world is ending. What fucking book are you talking about? There's gonna be no fucking book. And sure enough, Charlie dies. Because they're in the supermarket. Okay, first, they're in the supermarket and we see this... there's this scene where Sandra Bullock is getting closer to the black army guy. And we know where it's going to lead, you know, they are going to like fall in love, whatever. Why would you have a lovey-dovey moment inside the supermarket? Just grab the fucking food and get the fuck out, you know. Then John Malkovich is making like a joke toast. He's drunk, but at the same time his wife just died. So, I don't know. He's obviously a really cynical character, but it still doesn't really seem authentic to me. And he makes a joke where he essentially makes a Trump joke, okay? He makes a President Trump joke where he says, we'll make the end of the world great again. And it felt really forced, and this is around the time I started to suspect, you know, sort of who the director of this movie was, what sort of person that person is. It felt sort of like an Orange Man Bad joke, okay? So anyways, they're in the supermarket, Charlie sacrifices himself, because this movie could just be called, Should We Let People In? The movie, because they are in the supermarket, and a fucking guy knocks on the freezer door, please let me out, and they let him out, but then, you know, he's crazy, and for some fucking reason, 3 people are holding the door, and it's like I'm watching Game of Thrones, because this one guy is more powerful than 3 people trying to close the door. And I'm not talking about the pregnant woman. I'm talking about 2 men and the cop girl. So then Charlie sacrifices himself by tackling the guy, and he himself gets trapped in the freezer. And the most ridiculous part is Charlie dies. The crazy guy probably stabs him or something, but we don't fucking see that. These people don't give a fucking shit about him. They don't open the door to save him. They didn't shoot the crazy guy with the shotgun. No. They just like, they let Charlie die inside the freezer, and we see his blood like dribble through the door. He died so quickly, and didn't even scream or anything. It's such a needless, pointless fucking death. And it's obvious because it only serves us to reduce the number of people that live in that damn house. More on that later. So then they go back home with the food. The cop girl that fucked the bad druggy guy, they leave. They take the car with them because, again, we have to reduce the amount of people that live in the house. And it was an interesting, like, I don't know if that was symbolizing something, because, you know, it was the pretty hot girl who wasn't pregnant and the douchebag guy that sort of ended up being the bad characters. And then we go back to the present time. Mallory and the children are going down the river, and a lot of people are going to nitpick this scene because they hit something in the river, and one of the kids falls into the water. I thought this wasn't too bad, because it makes sense, you know, you're essentially traveling down the river blindfolded, you're gonna hit some rocks or something. But the most ridiculous thing about this scene is I think what they hit was a fucking truck in the middle of the river. So they even managed to ruin this scene. Their food falls into the water, so then Sandra Bullock has to essentially go and scavenge some food for them in a house. And now that I'm talking about the scene, they stopped at the side of the river, you know, they had the blindfolds on. How the fuck did she know that there was a house there? And I mean, in this scene, in this whole like river sequence, they are traveling down a pretty fucking remote river. How did she know? Whatever. Anyway, she goes inside to get the food, and the evil wind spirit thing makes her journey much longer than it should have been on the way back. So then what this like 5-year-old little girl does is tie a rope on herself and then go look for her. I don't think that she would do that, to be honest, in real life. I don't think a 5-year-old girl would kind of do that. And the reason why I say this, by the way, is at the very beginning of the movie, Sandra Bullock is telling these two kids that they should never ever take off the blindfold or, you know, leave the boat or anything like that. So yeah, she goes to find food, she goes back to the boat. Apparently the little girl became sentient, because even though she was told 100 million times by Sandra Bullock, remember, they were being raised by her for 5 years, and she's this like very logical, unemotional type of mom. Well, anyways, the little girl decides to go and look for her. Luckily, Sandra Bullock finds her, and they go back to the boat. And then again, Sandra Bullock gives them this pep talk. She tells them that, I quote, "If anything happens to me, just save yourselves." But this doesn't make any sense, because how the fuck is like a 5-year-old gonna save himself or herself? They need her to survive. And we also see this in another scene where they need Sandra Bullock to survive. So why the fuck would she tell them this information? You know, save yourselves, don't think about me, save yourself, children. They can't do anything. Then we go back to the past again, where obviously the black soldier guy and Sandra Bullock are getting, you know, warmer. They're getting closer to each other. And this is where we hear the black guy talk about him being a soldier for the first time. And remember the time when John Malkovich made the Trump joke? Where in this case the soldier guy is telling Sandra Bullock a story where he used to be a soldier in Iraq, and how horrible war is. And they used to escort this guy, you know, taking his children to the fucking school every day. And it just seems, first of all, the story makes no sense. Second of all, even if it's correct, even if it's taking the right side of an argument, it's still posing an argument as an agenda. And after this, we see the most ridiculous scene in the entire movie. So we had a scene where they let the pregnant fat girl in, and after that we saw a scene where they tried to let the crazy guy into the supermarket, you know, when he was in a freezer. And then for the third fucking time, there's another person knocking on the door, okay? And everybody's just like around the house, obviously. And the pregnant fat girl decides to just let the guy in like that. You know, no like asking questions or getting the shotgun or getting people around. She just lets this guy in. And then later on she says the reason why she did it is because, well, you guys let me in, so I just thought I paid the favor forward, essentially. And then we see this guy they let in, who looks like he's a white man, okay? He's a white man with a beard, and he's wearing like a business guy attire. And right as I'm like looking at what this guy is wearing and how he looks like, then I remember this like Netflix thing where, I don't want to spoil the ending of this video, like who the director of this movie is, but I'm like thinking in the back of my mind, you know, white business guy, he must be evil. And let's not talk about that yet, because yeah, they let the guy in. The pregnant fat girl lets the guy in, business guy. And right around this time, I'm writing on my notes where I wrote, I quote, "Maybe the movie is just an anti-pregnancy campaign and the joke was just lost on me. Because there's no fucking way this pregnant fucking fat girl is this stupid. She literally just lets a guy in like that." The business guy tells, you know, the group, John Malkovich wants to kill him. Or, not kill him, but John Malkovich gets the shotgun and he wants him to leave. But before that, the guy tells us, he gives us a new piece of information about this evil thing. He says that him and his business buddies try to, you know, get out, and There's like all these crazy people from an insane like mental asylum that have been turned, but they didn't commit suicide. So the new piece of information that we have is that all those people that, you know, turned, but they didn't commit suicide, they are essentially lunatics. They're essentially clinically insane. And as I'm watching this scene, it's so fucking pointless. You could have somehow shared this information in a different way instead of this long-winded scene. But it gets way worse, okay? So anyways, John Malkovich gets the shotgun and tells the guy to get the fuck out. In my opinion, this was the right decision. They don't know who this guy is. They don't know if he's like a bandit or maybe he has friends or, you know, anything like that. Then I had the idea of maybe they should have voted at least, you know, so it's like a sort of like a small democracy. They could have voted if they want the guy in or they want the guy out. No, what happens is the fucking old grandma, it's like a cartoon, it's like I'm watching a cartoon, okay, because fucking grandma takes a vase, out of all the objects, she takes a vase and she breaks it on the head of John Malkovich and he just collapses instantaneously. And the reason why I think this was really cartoonish is because I don't think he would have collapsed like that. I don't think he would have fainted. But even if he didn't, you know, what if Grandma scares John Malkovich so then he accidentally shoots someone, you know? Not to mention he tumbles onto the floor, and what if the gun just sort of goes off on itself? Because you dropped it. After this ridiculous scene, we go back to the present, where Sandra Bullock and the children are nearing a rapid part of the river. And she's talking about how one of the children has to look. They have to take off the blindfold, which could mean that that child essentially dies. Okay, because it's a very dangerous part of the river. And I was thinking to myself, this is one of the best scenes of the movie. Because, you know, it's a really heavy decision. But Sandra Bullock knows that she herself cannot look, because then they all die. By the way, right before this scene in, you know, the present time, we had the scene where Sandra Bullock is telling the kids that they should save themselves. So it just doesn't make any sense. Well, anyways, I thought this scene was really like heavy and very logical, but later on it gets ruined. So don't worry about that. They ruined this scene as well. This was a really short present tense scene, because we go back to the past. Remember, John Malkovich was knocked out with a fucking vase, and they decided to lock him in the garage, and they treat this newcomer business guy more of a friend than fucking John Malkovich, okay? Then a really very cliche thing happens. Surprise, surprise. Both Mallory, you know, Sandra Bullock, and Olympia, the fat pregnant girl, both the pregnant women in the story start to give birth at the exact same time. So then everybody, including obviously the two pregnant women, Grandma, even the black guy goes upstairs, and they leave the business guy Gary just, you know, free to roam around in the house downstairs. So the business guy takes out this folder he has. I don't know why they haven't checked if he has a gun or anything like that. Just fucking let him roam around the house. He takes out this folder that has photos that look like they are drawings that he has done, but they kind of look like, you know, one of those psychological drawings where they ask the patient what they see. He looks at one of the drawings, and then you see his eye turn, meaning that he was turned the same way as people are turned, you know, by looking at the evil wind. Then, because this wasn't enough, it wasn't enough that it's a fucking white business guy, you know, like in the Netflix fucking series. He's not only evil, but he puts, there are these birds that Sandra Bullock found in the supermarket, okay? He puts them in the freezer, indicating that he not tortures animals, but he's bad to animals, you know? Like we needed this piece of information to know that he's evil. Of course, the birds sense the danger. Maybe that's why he did it, but again, the scene felt like it was just another stone on the pile, you know? This guy is really evil, you know? This evil business guy, fuck white men, essentially. And then he finds this remote controller. John Malkovich has woken up in the garage, and evil business guy uses this remote controller to open the garage door. This was really comical to me because, for one, I don't know how the fuck the business guy found this remote controller. I don't know how he realized that it was a garage door. Of course, it only has one or two buttons, but still. And they just have a garage door remote controller lying about. You know, what if someone accidentally steps on it or touches it? And the garage door opens, and John Malkovich is obviously like covering his eyes to not look at the thing. And that's another plot hole. Not really a plot hole, but it's a ridiculous thing about this whole movie, where all you have to do is cover your fucking eyes and not open them to survive. But what's about to happen might shock you, viewer. Then we have another cartoonish scene, another knockout scene. So the women are giving birth upstairs. The black guy realizes kind of what's up. He takes the shotgun. He wants to kill the business guy, but he gets knocked out. He gets knocked out with, I kid you not, I think it was a tin can, like a can of food. The business guy used a can of food to knock out the black guy. So then evil business guy goes upstairs. Sandra Bullock and the fat girl gave birth already. Business guy goes upstairs and he rolls up the shutters of the windows so the evil presence could get to everybody. It was really weird because why wouldn't you just fucking, you know, bar the windows? Like a shutter is really not an adequate piece of defense against looking outside. You should have somehow, you know, taped it onto the windows or something. So the windows were not secure at all. Everybody's shouting, you know, don't look at the window, don't look at the window. Well, I don't know why. It was so fucking funny. The fat girl, she didn't fucking hear a single thing. She didn't hear all the shouting or anything. She looks at the window. Like you haven't just lived in that house for months in complete fear for the outside. She just looks at the window like it's nothing. And obviously she turns evil. At least Sandra Bullock could somehow secure the baby from her. And she just fucking jumps out the window, okay? Then evil business guy takes the scissors that they used to cut the umbilical cords. He takes the scissors from grandma and he kills her. Then John Malkovich manages to get inside from the fucking garage, takes the shotgun, but obviously he cannot see, he cannot open his eyes, which is actually pretty stupid because you can actually open your eyes for a while. The evil wind is not about it. It goes about like sort of like a creature. He goes upstairs with the fucking shotgun. He doesn't open his eyes for a fucking second, and he manages to shoot evil business guy in the arm. But then evil business guy tackles him and then kills him with the pair of scissors downstairs. And yeah, John Malkovich just bleeds out. Then, in a really dramatic, cliche sort of ending to this nonsense, the black guy wakes up. Remember, he was knocked out with a tin can of food. Wakes up and then he kills the business guy. But we don't know this, we just hear the gunshots. Mallory, you know, Sandra Bullock upstairs, is under the blanket with the babies. Again, another fucking stupid scene because Sandra Bullock could have just left the babies under the cover, closed her eyes, and then went downstairs to, you know, help John Malkovich not die to the business guy. No, she just stays upstairs. Well, of course, she just gave birth. You know, I'm not arguing about that, but still, just another little plot hole for you guys. Then 5 years pass. The only survivors are Sandra Bullock, the two children. The boy is from her, and the girl is from the fat girl. And there's of course the black guy who is essentially the husband material. I found this really funny because normally in our universe, the black guy knocks someone up and then leaves, not the other way around. Well, anyways, we go back to the present days where they get a radio. You know, it's kind of an okay scene. I liked it actually. They essentially taught the children, you know, growing up to the age of 5, you know, how to watch out for noises and the evil wind, how to communicate, always wear blindfolds outside. There's a scene where these crazy people are going around, you know, looking for survivors to turn them, but then they don't go inside. the house where Sandra Bullock and the black guy live. They get a radio signal, which is what we hear at the very beginning of the movie, but it's cliche as fuck, you know. We hear the radio, we are wondering, are they good people, are they bad people? They're talking about the shelter down the river, 2 days down the river, but then the radio signal jams. That's a very, very cliche thing as well. So we hear most of the message, but we don't hear the most important parts. They go and clear this house for food. They decided to go down the river because there's no food around anymore, which is believable because after 5 years, you clear out the neighborhood and then that's it. But that's kind of stupid as well because I guess they could have just gone around, like nomads. But then again, you could argue that the crazy people would have found them anyways. So they go and all 4 of them, they go to a new house to get food. But before this scene, we see, it's actually a really, really good scene in the movie. It's my favorite scene from this god-awful movie, where Sandra Bullock, we see this little scene where the black guy is telling a story to the children, and essentially, like, not lying to them, but it's like a little white lie. He tells about all the different animals and plants they can see when they get to the safe place, and he essentially is a really he's a really warm and loving father figure. And then Sandra Bullock is like arguing with him, why are you telling them lies? It's a cold hard world out there, you shouldn't be this soft because then you die. And the reason why I like this scene, a lot of people might say it's pretentious, a lot of people might say, Sandra Bullock is right or the black guy is right, but technically both of them are right. Obviously in a normal world, being a loving parent, the black guy's method of being an emotional thinker is what we call them, okay? It's better, but everybody's essentially dead, Sandra Bullock's method is also fine. And I feel like they were trying to, there's going to be a scene later that I'll explain, where essentially the director is trying to shove the opinion that the black guy is right, be a warming parent, even if the world outside is really harsh. But it doesn't make any sense because that's what gets you killed, FYI, normally women tend to be the emotional thinkers and men tend to be the logical thinkers. This is not some sort of a sexist agenda, it's just how it is. As I said, both methods are, fine. In some situations it's better to have, logical thinking than emotional thinking. In other times it's better to be an emotional thinker. As I said, in this sort of like end of the world scenario, I think it's better to go with, Sandra Bullock, being a logical thinker. It's another great, it's not really a hidden info. We realized that they didn't even name their children. Sandra Bullock didn't name her children. She just calls them boy and girl. Like she's Professor Oak from fucking Pokemon. I don't know, I kind of like that, but it's also stupid because I feel like black guy would have named them something at least. But the reason why they didn't name them is because they tried to shoehorn in this sort of ending at the very end of the movie, but more on that later. So then, after this like little scene, who is the better parent, blah blah blah, which method is better, they go and raid the new house to get food. And of course, the crazy people come around, and this time they actually find them. Black guy sacrifices himself. Another cliche thing. He sacrifices himself by telling Mallory and the children to go. They leave. He starts, blindfolded shooting at the bad guys, but he soon realizes that there's too many of them. There's like 5 of them. So what he does is he takes off the blindfold and he's like, fuck it, if I'm gonna die, I might as well, try to kill these guys. He kills everybody except one person. As I said, the moment you take off your blindfold, you don't die. That's what happens. He takes off the blindfold, he lives for another minute. Then the evil wind comes. It changes him, but the power of love inside the black guy is stronger than the evil wind. So then he manages to shoot the last person down, and he also commits suicide. That was one of the most cliche things in this movie. It's probably the worst scene for cliche things in my opinion. So this ties up the present and the past. Sandra Bullock takes the children down the river, and we are back to the scene, just before the rapid, the rapid part of the river. And I don't know how many of you watching this god-awful movie have realized this, but the scene where she's trying to pick, which children should look, so that they don't fucking die on the rapid part of the river. When Sandra Bullock is, trying to pick, if it should be the boy or the girl that takes off the blindfold, that's actually not really a metaphor, but it's a simile to, well, which child do you love more? Do you love your own child or do you love your adopted child more? And that was so fucking disgusting, man. I hated that scene. And what ended up happening is the most ridiculous thing, because Sandra Bullock is like, well, nobody has to look, okay? So they all end up essentially having their blindfolds. And at this part, I thought that, okay, she has a plan, okay? Because the way she said it, nobody has to take off their blindfolds. I thought she had a plan. No. No. They go down the rapid part of the river blindfolded, all three of them, and they crash the boat. Like, what did you think was going to happen? They crash the boat, but instead of dying, they have massive plot armor. Because Sandra Bullock finds the boy. The boy has like a bell with him that he uses in the river. I don't know how Sandra Bullock found him. Again, plot armor. Two of them are swimming, and apparently the girl made it out to the shore somehow. So then all three of them make it out to the shore. They don't die of hypothermia. Before there was a scene where the boy fell in the river, and instead of taking, his clothes off, it's a Netflix, movie. You can't make a child take their clothes off. He just like, he ends up living. Anyways, they get to the shore. Then they start walking in the woods. This is the last part of their journey. They're really close to the safe haven, because the reason why the movie is called Bird Box is the safe haven has birds. Birds warn the people when the evil wind is coming. So Mallory and the two kids are walking in the woods, and they're trying to listen to the bird sounds, because that's the only way they can tell which direction to go towards. I think they start running because they sense the evil wind. Again, this is stupid, because as long as you don't open your eyes, it cannot turn you. We know this. But then, anyways, fucking Sandra Bullock starts running. She falls, I kid you not, she falls over and she gets knocked out. The third fucking time in the movie, someone gets knocked out, like, in a really cliche way. She wakes up around, 20 seconds after she gets knocked out. But that's enough time for the children to sort of run away from her, even though she explicitly told them not to. I guess in one scene she told them that they should, save themselves, but it's all a fucking mess. The problem is that the evil wind is actually whispering to people. A lot of people might say that the evil wind is a metaphor for schizophrenia, because you can hear it talk to you. The wind is telling you essentially, to take off your blindfold. And this is what's happening, the evil wind is telling Sandra Bullock to take off her blindfold. She's obviously like, no, I'm not gonna. And then the evil wind is telling the children to take off their blindfolds, but in the voice of Sandra Bullock. So they don't really know what to do, and then it's like big drama essentially. Sandra Bullock manages to find the boy really easily, but then the girl is taking off her blindfold. We see her take off the blindfold, but she still has her fucking eyes closed. The most cliche thing in the movie, okay, I lied about the other one. The most cliche thing in the movie, they try to shoehorn in that you should be a loving mother instead of, the emotional thinker. Because the only way Sandra Bullock can convince the little girl not to take off her blindfold, not to open her eyes, is by basically she starts telling her, loving things like, yeah, we're gonna eat strawberries and we're gonna look at the birds, and it's so fucking dumb. She became like, she essentially, through this like conflict, she became a loving mother in like 5 seconds, and for whatever reason, the little girl then believes her. It doesn't make any sense, why. What they're trying to accomplish with this scene essentially is that children respond to love, positivity better than negativity. And that's true in normal circumstances, but in this case, something is trying to kill them, they are essentially trying to survive. It's just fucking stupid. So the little girl ends up listening to the actual Sandra Bullock voice. She doesn't open her eyes, and then they go towards the birds. And we get to the finally we get to the ending of this god-awful movie, but it's not over yet, okay? This movie, the ending of this movie reminds me of the Book of Eli, if you've seen that movie with Denzel Washington, because it turns out the safe place is essentially, it's a blind people home. So that's why they haven't turned, because they are blind. But what they don't explain is why didn't the crazy people go to the blind people home to kill them? You know, why wasn't this place raided and the other places were? Maybe it was really remote, but it's stupid. And you know, the blind people tell Sandra Bullock that there's also people that see here. Not everybody is blind, and they like walk outside. There's an outside part, but the reason why they can go outside there is because it's full of birds. Okay, this place is full of birds, and the birds warn the non-blind people of danger. It's a lot of plot holes. Okay, not only that, Sandra Bullock goes outside with her children. Then we see Dr. India from the very beginning of the movie turn up. Finally, we end the movie with another cliche thing. We haven't named the children yet. Let's name them at the very end of the movie, okay? And what else could Sandra Bullock name her children? You know, she names the girl after her fat girl mother, and she names the boy after the black guy. I have this like scene in my head. It's like a meme, because Sandra Bullock tells the girl, "Yeah, girl, your name is Olympia," and then the girl is like, "Because my mommy was called Olympia." No, because she took an Olympic dive out the window. You know, when the business guy tried to kill them. That's what she did. The fucking fat girl just looked at the window like it's nothing, turned, then she jumped out of the window. And also, she named the boy after the black guy. The black guy was called Tom, but this was another cliche moment, because what if the black guy had like a non-white name? You know, what if the black guy was called Demetrius Darnell Deshawn? Yeah, all in all, not a good movie. Really not a good way to start 2019, man. And there's one thing left. There's actually two things left to say. Explaining what the movie is about, some theories. This movie is actually a little bit less clear to explain than other horror movies, other psychological movies. We didn't get to see what the evil entity, the evil wind, looked like. We can get a good guess from the drawings of the evil businessman. But someone said that essentially this movie, because of the blind people, you know, not seeing, not turning evil, people commit suicide in North America at an increasing rate. So essentially, this evil spirit wind is a metaphor for people committing suicide because of their works, because of their exams, because of their, you know, school life. And the only reason blind people don't turn evil and commit suicide is because they appreciate life more. So this movie is essentially a metaphor for you should be more grateful for your life. That's it. And one piece of information is left to be shared. Who is the director of this movie? I swear to God I didn't check this, you know, before watching this movie or writing my notes. And sure enough, the director is a woman named Suzanne Bier. Suzanne Bier was born to a Jewish family in Copenhagen, Denmark in 1960. Now, I'm not the type of person who submits to different conspiracy theories, okay? But I don't have to be a blind person to see that a lot of movies and a lot of series nowadays produced in Hollywood are from women belonging to, you know, Jewish families. The Bird Box is yet another Netflix movie / adaptation / series where different agendas are being pushed onto us. I can't wait to see personally what they make of the Witcher series on Netflix. That was a little bit of a sarcasm because I can wait. If you actually want to watch a decent horror movie, I know a lot of people also hate these movies, but yesterday I watched Hereditary. It's sort of like a new agey horror. It's not about being scary, okay? And the day before I watched Annihilation. Again, a lot of people hate these movies, a lot of people love them, but I would 100% recommend those movies over Bird Box. This has been Two Siders. Thank you for watching.